Hi, welcome back to another episode of Time with Gabby. With me here is
Tanse, Cheyenne, Nitsigason, Egwa Tugs, Nitsigason, and Wiskuchuaskakin Otsinia. So I'm Cheyenne, aka Tugs, and I'm from what is colonially known as Edmonton.
That's amazing. It's a pleasure to finally have you on my podcast.
Thanks for having me.
How are you doing today?
I'm doing good. Yeah, sunny, gorgeous on my back deck, and feeling good.
Absolutely. You have a beautiful view from here. Shame has have fun all the time. So what's new with you?
Holy Hannah. My life has undergone a lot of change in the last year, you know. So yeah, lots of stuff is new and exciting and scary and hard and yeah, lots.
I hear here. What would you say is your happiest childhood memory?
Oh God, girl. Trigger warning for, you know, just like childhood abuse and trauma.
If you don't want to talk about
No, it's like
okay,
that's my
perfect.
life story. So like when I think of like my happiest childhood memory, like I have to wade through years of abuse to like get to that memory. So I have a hard time like figuring like one exact memory, but I think some of my happiest times were like when I was in the mountains.
Nice.
You know, like in the mountains with my family, even though it was a tough family to grow up in. I was adopted by my biological mom's sister and her husband. And so I was raised with them and grew up in violence. And so growing up, there's not a lot of good memories in there, but they do exist. But yeah, I'd say anytime I was in the mountains or in nature, those were like my best memories.
That's great. How would you compare life now you're an adult to when you were a child?
Yeah, I mean, there's still trials and tribulations, you know, especially as an adult. I think like the difference now is that I think when I experience hardship or trauma or grief, I'm able to have a whole life of experience to like, you know, that lens to look at it through. And so it gives me a different perspective. And so I have these tools in my toolkit that I can use to help go through stuff. And joys feel, I think, more joyful because I've gone through so much through my whole life, right?
I think little Cheyenne will be proud.
Little Cheyenne would be stoked. I think that little Cheyenne would be like, wow, like you are like, you're doing some cool stuff. I think little Cheyenne would be very happy. I grieve for little Cheyenne, you know, like
True.
I'll probably cry a lot. They call me crying. Just
Oh my God.
always crying. I'm like, yeah, always crying. But yeah, like I think of little Cheyenne and I think of everything that they went through. And how unfair that was. And so the fact that like as an adult I can create this world for myself that would make little me proud.
So when was drag for you?
What do you mean? Sorry.
When was drag? When did you start your drag career?
Yeah, I just had my third drag birthday.
Oh, happy
Thank
belated.
you. August 27th was the first time I did a performance. But my first time being in drag was several months before that. I was working at HIV Edmonton at the time.
Nice.
Yeah, it was a good job. And I did like community education around HIV and party and play and, you know, harm reduction. And so we did this really cool event where we wanted to train a bunch of drag performers in, and I wanted burlesque performers too, but we didn't get any at that time, but train them in sexual health and harm reduction, and then have them create drag numbers out of their
Nice.
education. Yeah, so I teamed up with Party Queens, and we did a big training session. Everybody took the information, and then COVID happened. So it kind of just like shut things down for a while. We did end up doing the show, but it was virtual. It's on Dragging
I
Our
can
Heels.
imagine.
It was a whole thing. Being an Evo and performing to an empty bar is, I'm sure, really surreal. I didn't perform because I wasn't Tugs
performer
yet.
then, yeah.
Yeah, but that was the first day that my previous drag parent had put me in face, and that was when I got brought into her house. And it was the first time of actually like being in drag. And yeah, it took a little while before Tugs was actually born.
So what made you decide to go into drag then? Did you just see the product queens perform and be like, I think I can do better, or I don't see a little representation of me out here and I want to do something like this? Like, what was your thought process behind
Yeah, never like
Tugs first?
never like I can do better because I can't dance for shit. I can't sew. My makeup skills are not the greatest. I don't think that I'm better than anybody in any of that regard. But the representation aspect of it, like you said. So
what makes you unique? As
yeah,
well.
like Tugs was born out of a need for like in your face indigeneity. When I watch like RuPaul's Drag Race, or even when I watch Dragula, like I see some cool art, but I don't necessarily see something that makes me feel like I'm in that art, or I can see myself in that art. Right? Indigenous representation is so important, and when I watch those shows, I just don't see myself, especially from a masculine perspective. And so, as a two-spirit person who's exploring my gender fluidity and my non-binariness, or we have a term in Cree, Tastiwinawa, which is the in-between person. And so I feel like I'm an in-between person. And so getting to explore masculinity through drag was kind of one reason of why I wanted to start doing drag. I wanted to see who I could be in a more masculine side. Because I was like identifying as femme, and then I was looked down one day and I was like, I'm not femme. I'm actually a little bit butch. And so it was like this realization of like, okay, masculinity is actually something I could probably bring into my life. So came out of that. But yeah, really like in your face indigeneity. Like I wanted to somebody to come to a show and see that representation of our culture, not just necessarily an indigenous performer, but like indigenous music, indigenous costuming. That was always really important to me, and it's been a big part of who Tugs is, right? So yeah, I was born out of a need to see indigenous content just be there and just be present.
That's amazing. What would you say your favorite performance is today?
My favorite, oh my goodness, there's such a like range of performances. One of my like all-time favorite performances, I would have to say, when we did the drag.jpg launch, and I did my Uncle 2 Dudley mix. I don't know why, I think like that just was one that was like, yeah, it just felt really like I could be my true, authentic, indigenous self on that stage. When I opened for Land Insider and I did my Turtle Island Palestinian like awareness number, like that one was like really emotional for me, right? When I did my residential schoolhouse blues number and I cut my braids off on stage in honor of the residential school survivors, I bawled the whole time, right? So like when you think of like best performance, it's not so much like favorite or best, there's just like moments in my career as Tugs where I'm like, I have like a highlight of my camp, I have a highlight of my emotion, a highlight of my, and then I have some like low ones where I'm like, oh, we just won't even think about that one.
I must say, I remember when you presented as Femme on stage. What's the Femme presenting artist called?
Well, it's still Tugs. Yeah, we're still Tugs. We're just Auntie
I
and
was
Uncle.
gagged. I was like, the fact you can do both is amazing.
Yeah, I like doing both, and I like
That's
blending
great.
a little bit of masculine with a little bit of
The
feminine.
in between.
Yeah, the in between. When I do like the full hyper femme, but then I just have a big beard, right? Like, and I do a little bit more masculine contouring. I'm not great at contouring. It's cool. You can read me for my makeup, but I like started doing makeup in 2017, and I started with just wearing lipstick, and I was like, ooh, I'm wearing lipstick. You know, I was like in my late 20s, and I was like, ooh. Yeah, exactly. Like, and so when I started doing drag, that was a really big learning curve for me, was the makeup. So when I get to do Auntie, it's a different makeup process than with Uncle, and I think both of them just tap into little different parts of my creativity that I would have thought. Yeah. I am a creative person. Who would have thunk?
Thank the creator.
It's true. But we spend so much of our life getting our curiosities like dampened, right? Like, you know, I had this experience with my aunt mom who raised me growing up. I used to write a lot of poetry. I really loved, like, that's how I got out some of my emotion, was through poetry. And it was used against me in a malicious way once, and like I stopped writing poetry. And I think that was like the death of my creativity for a long time. I felt like I couldn't put myself out into the world in a creative way because it would be used or weaponized against me. And so when I realized, like, doing drag, oh wow, I can actually still be creative. Like, that's, yeah, it was a very empowering process to go through.
Yeah, I think drag tends to bring out the best in us that we didn't even know, oh, I didn't know I had this in me.
Yeah, like, dang, I have hips. Like, I have not much of a butt, but I can do something with it. It's like, it's little, but it's there.
So, what was your reaction when you got a title at Evo?
I remember the exact moment. I was like, I had a couple nominations that night, but I went into it being like, I'm so new in the scene. Like, I'm not gonna win any of these nominations. Like, I was like, I'm not gonna win. It's fine. That's okay. I'm just here to have a good time and celebrate. I was in drag. I wore that stupid mustache that night because I was like, I'm not performing and I'm not gonna win. I'm not gonna be in any photos. I'll wear the big mustache. So I'm standing off to the side. I'm having a drink. I had had a couple drinks that night. I was feeling a little good. And I don't know, I wasn't even paying attention. I was just talking. And then Rob starts announcing the title. And when I heard Mr. Evo, in my head, I was like, oh, it's Stretcher. I don't know why. It was just like, Stretcher. And then it was like Tugs, Cucina. And I was like, well, we don't use the Cucina anyway, but Tugs. And I was like, wait a minute. And it took a second of processing. I was like, oh wait, that was my name. And Colin Bay like grabbed my drink and like pushed me, was like, that's you, go. And you can see the video on Doe when I walk on stage and I look genuinely confused. I still to this day, I'm like, I appreciate the opportunity to have been given the title. I hope I represented well with it. It's something that I really take to heart. Like, I know it's just a gay bar at the end of the day, but like, it's the place where we put a lot of ourselves into.
That is correct.
It's the place where we build connections, where we build community, whatever that looks like to different people in the scene. But it was important to me, and it was something that I took to heart. So, and it felt like affirming to me to be seen for my creativity, for my kindness, for the way I carry myself, my integrity, who I am as a person and a performer. And so that felt very affirming for me, and it was, again, a part of that empowerment process that drag has given me. So I was shocked. You can see it in the photo. You can see it in all the videos.
I think you've always been cool. Ever since I've known you, you've always been cool and amazing. I remember speaking of the gay bar, I remember that was where I met you for the first time, and you just performed and you were leaving with your mom. Or your mom was trying to get in, I can't remember. And I remember it was me and Tinica who were working at the door. A full circle moment, and now you and Tinica. Let's talk about love.
I love that girl. She's awesome. She's great. Yeah. Tinica.
That's amazing. It's been a full circle moment. It's been a full circle moment. I'm like, oh my God, this life is such a tiny world. Like,
it is,
you never know what tomorrow brings, and you never know what tomorrow takes. So you just gotta live life as it comes, you know.
It's true. Yeah.
What would you say is your least favorite number?
Oh gosh, I did this number, I think it was for one of Gemma's shows, like maybe last October. I was working a lot that month, and I feel like I didn't put enough of myself into my art that month because my work was at the forefront of my life that month. And so I did this number, and I just remember going out, like there was actually this person that was in the front row, and she sat there like this the entire time. Just no movement. There was not even an inkling of like, that was good. And I walked off the stage and I was like, that is not going on dragging our heels. I grabbed Sammy and I was like, please do not post that. So that performance, that one in particular, was terrible. My other least favorite, it's not really necessarily one performance, but I get dry mouth on stage an like insane amount. And so there's sometimes when I'm performing and I'm like, oh no, it's happening. And then I'm like, it sucks. Or the time the mustache wasn't properly staying glued down and it kept going in my mouth, so it looked like I was doing this the whole time.
Right.
I'm doing like aerials by System of a Down, and it's so like raw and powerful, and I'm like, terrible. We could just forget those performances for sure.
Oh my God, you're so funny. Oh my God. So I've observed you're one of the few people out there that continue to speak about injustice and voice out your opinions and how things are in the world. Why do you think that is important?
I think like growing up Indigenous and not really knowing what that meant until like more when I was in my adulthood, and recognizing how much of my life is like has been impacted by injustice that was so out of my control, that when I have an ability to speak up and say something, it feels a disservice to myself to not speak up. and I'm already emotional about it, right? Because
I'm sorry.
No. This is good. I'm happy to talk about stuff. I just cry all the time. I watched a margarine commercial one time, and it was all these kids talking about why they needed their moms on Mother's Day, and I bawled. It was like Basel, and I was like, so I'm just a crier. But yeah, so with the speaking out, I think it's just like I have this voice, and I just have never been shy about using it. And I'm learning to pick my battles. I'm learning to find out when it's appropriate to use my voice and when it's not, or when it's maybe not necessarily not appropriate, but when it's not going to be like heard or useful or understood, right? And sometimes like I'm only human, but I think when I see things happening and I don't see people talking about it, that hurts me. Like I can't just ignore that. Like if something is wrong and we can fix it, then why aren't we fixing it? You know, like, and if we have the capability, like global poverty, I'm like one small person, like I'm gonna have a really hard time fixing that.
Yourself,
right?
sure,
But like when it comes to our local community, our local scene, as maybe some people might prefer I call it, when it comes to Edmonton drag scene, me being vocal about all this stuff is because I want the best for this community. And because I can see the good in this community. I know that we can be good to each other and we can love each other. And maybe we just love each other from real far away.
Yeah.
But that's okay.
Yeah.
We just like we're not gonna kiki with everybody. But like, why do we have to make it that people aren't welcome at events, or that shows that are, you know, holding space for one particular type of community is wrong? Like when it's that kind of stuff, like, no, I'm sorry, I'm gonna speak about that, because like as an Indigenous masculine presenting, primarily masculine of center performer, who has a pussy, like you know, there's shows that just like they won't cast me because of those things, right? Because I'm fat, because I'm a king,
correct,
because I'm not a dancer, right? Like I'll never get booked for some shows that are just like catering to the more mainstream community, right? Because I don't fit of what the box of what a mainstream drag artist is. So I'm gonna absolutely use my voice if it's gonna help support our community to be more inclusive, right? And when it comes to like my activism outside of the drag space, I just like I can't watch a government pass legislation that's gonna put my own family at risk, or you know, like, so yeah, I'm vocal, and I think sometimes people don't understand that. I think sometimes people think we should be just like, you know, taking a step back and letting other people lead, but then who's gonna do the leading if someone's not stepping up?
Someone has to do it.
We can't all just sit back, because otherwise then change doesn't happen, right? And change is scary. Sometimes when we're asking people to reflect on their behaviors, we're not trying to cancel you, we're not trying to like perpetuate harm against you. We're literally just asking you to reflect on what we could do better and how we can be in relations better. And that's how I like thinking about it, like how do we be in better relations with each other? And as you know, I'm not good in relations with everybody, and that's okay, but I just hope that we can find a way to repair that, and at the very least, like, just be able to exist in a community together.
Do you think when they call people out and they don't take that well, do you think it's as a result of how people are calling them out? You know, I think personally, I believe that if you see something bad or someone doing something bad, like, your approach is all that matters. Do you think that's a reason on why people tend to not listen to when people are calling them out, or do you think people are just full of themselves and are like, no, I can do no wrong?
Well, I think it's a bunch of factors. I don't think we can put one singular of those onto everything. Like, I don't think it's so black and white, right? Like, I think a lot of us that I've encountered, that I've, like, you know, in these particular conversations in our community, a lot of us are coming from trauma. We are like some of the most marginalized community members within our society as a whole, right? And so I think there's a number of factors, right? Yeah, ego absolutely sometimes plays a factor. Approach 100% matters. It's tough in digital spaces.
Yeah,
Text
because now
messaging,
everyone
tone,
just
right?
goes on the story and yap and everything.
So how do we create an opportunity to have in-person dialogue, right? Like, sometimes those like those aren't even facilitated, right? Like there's been issues where people have had a Facebook post, and then people will respond to the Facebook post in a positive way, not necessarily coming at them, but just like sharing their perspective, and then the entire post just disappears, but there's no conversation about what happened.
That is correct.
Right? Like that. I just think everybody can do better. We all can do better. And that includes like the way we approach difficult conversations and the way we receive difficult conversations, right? Like, absolutely, tone matters. Texting, you have a hard time being able to share or convey emotion through text, right?
That's if you're not blocked, though.
Yeah, that's if you're not blocked. I mean, that's fair. A lot of us hit that block button. And sometimes hitting the block button is the best thing you can do for your mental health.
That is correct. Mental health comes first, actually. So.
And sometimes just stepping away and being like, I don't have the patience for this right now. But it's like knowing when to. And I think a lot of us have a hard time of being like, okay, that was probably one message too far. We've all been guilty of that. Maybe I should have hit the block button like 5 seconds sooner. Maybe we should all hit the block button a little more. But if we just found better ways of having communication and conversation, like it really comes down to conflict resolution.
Yes.
Right? Like if we all understood conflict resolution a little bit better and we found better ways of mediating conflict together and less being like in competition and more being in kinship, I think things would go a lot smoother.
That's amazing.
And I'm not like that goes for me too.
Yeah.
Sometimes my conflict resolution isn't the greatest either, and like that's a skill that I can improve on as well.
I mean, at the end of the day, we're humans, so we still have our flaws.
And a lot of drag performers do have a lot of ego. Sometimes we do.
It's the nature of the job.
But then how do we balance ego with kinship, right? How do we carry that each other's ego and find grace for each other?
That is correct. I guess that's life at the end of the day.
It is life at the end of the day. You're not wrong.
What's your biggest pet peeve?
I was looking at that question when you said the questions, and I was like, I don't know if I necessarily have a pet peeve. A lot of the things that I would have called a pet peeve, I'm realizing are related to my neurodiversity, right? I would have said like, oh, people chewing, can't stand it. People snoring, can't stand it. Well, now I understand I have misophonia. So because of my ADHD, I have auditory sensory processing issues. And so it's not that I hate people chewing, it's that my brain processes that sound in a way that is like disturbing to me. And so like I can't control that. So that's not necessarily a pet peeve. It's just like I'm neurospicy. I was reflecting on that question. I was like, I do have a lot of pet peeves, but I'm realizing a lot of my pet peeves are actually more just like neurospiciness, or like, again, back to justice, right?
Yeah.
Like, I don't tolerate trash. I don't tolerate transphobia, racism, ableism, sexism, or homophobia. Take your trash out. I don't want none of it. Is that a pet peeve, or so much of just like I prefer humanity?
Well, I think it's up to a person, right? Like, if you find that as a pet peeve, because just some people, they can't stand others like chewing too hard, like.
But is it really a pet peeve, or maybe they also have undiagnosed ADHD and it's actually just misophonia?
Mental health is really broad at the end of the day, right?
That's
You
true.
never know. I never know what's going on in your head, and you don't know what's going on in my head. So when I react in a certain way, that's when grace comes into place. Like, you try to understand what I'm going through. I took a course and it said, if someone makes you angry, or if someone gets you mad or whatever, you don't say, you made me mad. You say, I am mad because of your actions.
Yeah.
This world is just getting complicated every day, but it will become a better world someday, hopefully.
Yeah, and that's part of like non-violent communication, like conflict resolution, right? Like being able to step back and own your own feelings and be accountable.
Correct.
I think accountability is something that's really like necessary for a lot of people. Like everybody should be taking accountability, but some people I don't think know what that means.
What was your first job?
Oh God, first job. What was my first job? Telemarketing at Zentel.
Really?
Yeah, just little phone stuff. When I was like 14, I left home at 14, and so I kind of like had to get a job. I worked through high school, and
Oh my God.
I lived on my own from 14 to 16.
Really?
Yeah, like in and out of group homes, on the streets, Edmonton Young Offenders Center, lockup, like a YYC, so from 14 to 16, I was really heavily involved in like meth and like on and off the streets and just really street involved and doing a lot of really Stuff that 14, 15, 16-year-olds should not be doing.
But at the end of the day, I mean, I'm so proud of how far you've come and like living a healthy life and
yeah. And I don't like I don't feel shame in talking about my past. A big reason of why I spent a decade working in the community is because of how community saved my life, right? Like I went to high school at the Royal Street Education Center, and they, you know, I was there for 6 years, from 14 to 20, and the first 3 years that I was there, I was deep in meth addiction, you know, and they did everything they could to support me through that. And it was like iHuman Youth Society, Old Strathcona Youth Society, all these community organizations and community-minded folks taught me how we can care for each other and what that word community means and what kinship looks like. And so that's why I spent the last 10 years working in nonprofits and working in frontline roles, and then eventually getting that, you know, previous position with the last organization I was with. But like that, all of that work that I did working in community is because of my history. And it's because of all the hard stuff that I went through, right? And so I'm open in talking about my childhood. You know, as hard as it was, it led to a really difficult youth, you know, and then in my adulthood, I'm like thriving and growing. You know, I have a university degree, I have a beautiful home that I live in, I've got friends and family that love me, I have a beautiful partner, I've got a wonderful drag career, you know, and even though things with my career might not be where I would like them to be right now, you know, there's just learning and growing that comes from everything along the way. So yeah, I don't know how I got to that point in or even what your question was anymore. But
I love the fact that you're owning your story and you're encouraging and inspiring people out there that they should not feel guilt or shame.
No, and a lot of the decisions that I made that weren't necessarily healthy or positive decisions that put me in, you know, unsafe positions. Making those decisions as a fucked up 14-year-old, like I can understand why I made the decisions that I made, right? Like when you grew up in trauma, like somebody once said, and I can't remember who it was, but I heard this quote, and it's to be born in indigenous is to be born into grief. Like whether or not you like grow up in your culture, you always carry a sense of grief.
That is
right?
correct.
And so I think for me, I had all of this stuff that lined up for me before I was even born that kind of put me at a disadvantage. And so that led to those poor decisions that I made, you know, having residential school survivor grandparents who didn't know how to love their kids, and then they would raise kids who they then don't know how to love. And so it's like this cycle that my family was in. And so going to the streets led me to community, which led me to all of the beautiful things that I have now. So yeah, I'm happy to talk about my story. I don't shy away from sharing my story and who I am, because yeah, again, I have a big voice and I'm happy to use it. And if someone hearing my story, if it can impact somebody in a way that can make a decision for themselves, if it can impact some program delivery or someone wanting to do something else with their life, then I'm happy to share that story.
I went to the Royal Alberta Museum and my mouth was on the floor when I went to the human history. And I'm like, this is why people need to keep speaking up and keep educating others and the history, you know. But we've come towards the end of the show. Where can we find you on Instagram or social media?
Just Instagram. I'm not on the TikTok or the Facebook. I'll probably be on Facebook again at some point, but I'm off it now. So for Tugs, you can find at tugs.drag, and then Real Deadly Productions, which is my production company, which is a little quiet right now, but you can find that at real.deadly.productions.
Speaking of your productions, I know you brought was it London?
Yeah,
Let's
that was
talk about that.
I'm really grateful to Rob and Evo for giving me the chance to partner on that event.
That was amazing.
I will like that is one of the highlights of my entire drag career, is that moment when all of the kings and things were on stage and we all started barking and we scared Landon and he was like, what the fuck is going on? And we're all like, that was
the
like
dogs.
I think it was Tanner who said it best, was if we would have done this when I started doing drag, there would be like 2 of us here with Landon, right? And so like in the time that Tanner's been doing drag, and the time that say even Secretia Manor has been doing drag, your mom, you know, so much, they're like the trailblazers for us. They laid the path down for us to have a place on stage. And so that's why, again, it's really important that I use a voice, because then we get to have shows like Landon, we get to have people like Tanner and Secretia, and other people that are going to come behind them as well. So
when is your next drag show? Where can they find you next?
I'm pretty quiet right now. I have some shows that I can't announce yet because they haven't been announced yet.
Okay, perfect then.
Yeah.
Okay, yeah. This is gonna come out soon, so.
Okay, yeah. Nothing's been announced yet, but you'll just follow my social media and it'll get posted on there.
Well, thank you so much. It's been an amazing time. Thank you for sharing your story. Thank you for making time out for Gabby. And we'll catch you all on the next episode. Bye.